Welcome to the Nordic Mythology podcast. I'm Daniel Farrand, owner of the company Horns of Odin. And just before we jump into the show, I just want to quickly mention our Patreon page because it is how we keep the lights on, how we keep everything going here. And if you can support us on there, it would be much appreciated. It's £3 a month, so that's 10p a day. And what you get is a bonus episode every week. So we sit down with the guests after the show and we do a Q&A where you can ask your questions or you could submit them ahead of time. You also get story time with Jonas Lorentzen. You get access to our Discord channel. There's a bunch of really awesome features over there. So if you can support us, like I say, it does help us keep going. It keeps you, Rowan, producing the episodes, Alyssa doing the social media. There's a whole team behind the scenes. So if you can, pop over there and have a look. And if not, a 5-star rating, a positive review wherever you get your podcast would be appreciated as well. But today we're going to be talking about myth with Jan Kozák. This is your second time here, but the first time actually recording because last time we did half an episode and I forgot to hit record, unfortunately. So we're going to try it again.
So thank you for inviting me for the second time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it's welcome back, but kind of. So, welcome back. Do you want to just let people know kind of who you are, what you specialize in?
Yeah. Okay. So I studied Latin and religious studies, and with this, I studied also other old dead languages like ancient Greek, Hebrew, Sanskrit, and Old Norse. And so I spent much more years than usual at the university, taking more and more courses, and so I was very much into these old languages. On the other hand, I studied comparative religion or religious studies, and that was always my passion. And I studied this at the Charles University in Prague. And after my PhD, I went on a postdoc to Bergen in Norway, where I focused on body symbolism in Old Norse mythology. There I spent 2 years. I organized and co-organized conferences and workshops and stuff. And I published some, finally also works in English, because until then I was publishing books and articles, but most of them in Czech. So I switched to international at that time. And and from that time on, I'm just a professor in Prague. And my focus is, on one hand, Old Norse, like the cultural area of Old Norse mythology, but because of my, let's say, linguistic the number of old, mostly Indo-European languages that I know, I also have the ability to, let's say, orient myself a little bit in various related mythologies and cultures, especially Indian and old Italic, let's say, Roman area. But after I returned from Bergen, my whole, the department was at this time in Prague changing a little bit the focus of, until then we were all like this, like focused on all dead cultures, really doing mythology, polytheism, all this kind of stuff. But at that point, we started to refocusing a little bit on towards contemporary mythology and contemporary quasi-religions of various sorts. So I jumped on this wagon a little bit, and as another thing on the side, I started a research group focusing on the research of conspiracy theories as modern mythology, using the tools that I know from comparative religion or the study of mythology for the study of this very contemporary mythological imagination. And so that's basically
It's a lot. I mean, I look forward to us touching on conspiracy theories. That one fascinates me. How many languages do you know?
I mean, actively I speak just Czech and English. I mean English, whatever this is, but passively I can read these dead languages that I mentioned. So Latin, Greek, Sanskrit, Hebrew, and Old Norse. Mostly, I mean, like simple texts, of course, on the spot, but this kind of source text that I also read as a part of my curriculum, primary texts from the original languages. That's usually with commentaries and dictionaries, and you have to check everything. But it's the real treasure that at the end of the rainbow lies the original text, original Sanskrit text, original Greek text, where it's the closest you get to a photo from the ancient times, because you see the way how the culture thinks, something that you cannot get from textbook or from Wikipedia page. That you can only get it from in-depth reading of the original text. That was like I spent 10 years doing this kind of stuff. Very, very text-focused person.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I have two questions. One, firstly, a quick answer maybe. Is it possible to speak or be fluent in those dead languages? Is it possible for somebody to do that? Not necessarily yourself, but I was just curious.
Yeah, it is possible. There are, for example, people who are doing Latin. Some small percent of these people are really trying to make Latin a living language. There are all the vocabulary for modern things, machinery, mobile phones, everything exists. So you can speak Latin, and there are people who are more or less fluent in Latin, but it's a very small number of people. I suppose the same or a very similar thing as Sanskrit is a kind of Latin for the Indian subcontinent. There are people who are able to speak Sanskrit fluently. I haven't ever met one, but I know that there are those kind of people. I don't know about ancient Greek and actually biblical Hebrew is very close to contemporary Hebrew. So I think that's such a great feat to be able to speak.
Mm-hmm. I was just curious whether it was possible.
Yeah.
When you're go on, sorry.
No. I was just last time I gave an example of how, for example, a piece of Sanskrit sounds. Or
you did. Please, if you can do that again, that would be brilliant, because Sanskrit is always one that fascinates me.
Yeah. Okay. So last time I did one short. Two verses. I think I try a different 2 verses this time so that I don't repeat myself. And so this is how it goes. Satyam mata pita jnanam dharmo bhrata daya svasa shantih patni kshama putrach shat ete mama bandhavah, which means in translation, truth is my father. No, truth is my mother. Knowledge is my father. Satyamata pitashanam dharmo brata. Dharma or law is my brother. Satyamata dharmo brata daya svasa. Compassion is my sister. Peace is my wife. And how should I translate it? Let's say patience is my son. These are my 6 relatives. So it's I like to memorize these sayings that somehow illustrate something beautiful about the culture. The culture. And it's also very practical, because when you learn this simple example, you also learned all the words so you don't have to learn them like in your notebook. You just learn the passage, and now you know how to say mother, father, son, daughter, stuff like that. So that's also practical. And for me, it's a window into a different type of imagination, thinking, culture. Yeah.
So, what about the pronunciation? I know we're a little bit off topic. How do they figure out how the words would sound? Because I guess it's one thing seeing them written, and then another knowing exactly how they would kind of come out.
I think this, as Sanskrit has a unbroken tradition and very strict phonological treatises coming with the language. There is not much. I think there is not much questions about it. I might personally pronounce something a little bit off, like the ash sounds and stuff like that. But otherwise, it's exactly as I told it. But of course, some languages like Latin or Old Norse, there is a problem. Like you have in Latin, you have the reconstructed pronunciation, which is the pronunciation of from the time when it was a spoken language in the Roman Empire. So, for example, we know that the name Caesar was pronounced, in fact, Caesar, or the name Cicero was in fact pronounced Cicero, and these kind of things. But we know just approximately how they were pronounced, not exactly. So we don't get this kind of like the feel in the mouth, the thing that you learn when you really hear foreign language as a living language. So you can, we all say like the letter T, but in Czech it's T, in English it's T, the same sound but different. So we don't know exactly how in Latin, for example, T was pronounced. Was it with a little bit of aspiration or a little bit of tension? This type, that type, this kind of exact sound we cannot get. We get only approximate pronunciation, and that's also the same with Old Norse. So we have reconstructed Old Norse, but we don't know the exact taste of the language. That's why, for example, when I was learning Old Norse, I consciously learned it with contemporary Icelandic pronunciation, even if it is anachronistic. So some words don't function, for example. Some alliteration doesn't work because something, sound H should alliterate with H, but in time, some H sounds shifted, disappeared, or whatever. So suddenly the poem doesn't work exactly. But I appreciated so much the fact that I could learn living sound of language. So that was for me much more important than the exactness. So that there is always this kind of tension, either have it in a living form or have it more precise in respect with.
How accurate do you think the modern reconstruction of Old Norse is? I mean, if that's even a thing you can hazard a guess at, because I would, for somebody like me, and I guess for most people, when you have somebody like yourself that would speak Old Norse, I'm just kind of like, oh, that's probably what it must have sounded like, because I'm not trained to hear the nuances and the slight differences. So I'd be curious as to how accurate you think it would be. I
actually, I don't have a professional opinion on this. I believe what the colleagues that produced the reconstruction, in this sense, I don't have any like special addition to what is there. Just the fact that, when you, for example, try to learn Icelandic, you have an exact point where if you are good enough, Icelanders think that you are from Iceland because you speak exactly as them. But in the cases like the reconstructed Latin or the reconstructed Old Norse, every speaker, even if they try as much as they can, in the end speak a little bit like a Swiss person speaking Old Norse or a German, you know what I mean. So in the end, you always get this coloring that comes from your original language. And even if you are a good phonologist and good with languages, you never reach some kind of, you know.
Oh, I completely get that, because I've been trying to learn a little bit of Norwegian, and I can't even order a coffee. I can't order a cappuccino in Norway without them knowing that I'm an English person trying to order and it's literally just en cappuccino. It's the same fucking word that we have, and they still know I'm not Norwegian. It's like, is it that bad? Is my English pronunciation of this, Norwegian pronunciation of the same word of English that different? And it must just be. It must be just so different. Or I just look like a typical English person as well.
Yep. But Norway in this sense is a rather welcoming country because there are so many dialects. So people are somewhat more like ready to hear something pronounced in a non-standard way. Mm-hmm. I think smaller countries or more closed countries, or more like unified, like linguistically unified countries like Iceland, there everybody immediately distinguishes somebody who is from there from somebody who is,
I think with Norway in particular, because everybody speaks English, particularly like in the States, and it's as soon as they realize that you're not Norwegian, it's just easier for them just to flip to English because they speak English just as well as you do. So it's, I guess I know a few people who will learn who find that not find it necessarily frustrating, but it's like they're trying to learn and have that natural conversation, but as soon as they try, it's so obvious that they're not native Norwegian that whoever they're speaking to just speaks back in English because it's just easier, and they're like, oh no, I want to try my Norwegian.
But you have to probably pressure it, because I also am very shy. First I have to have I have to have a mastery of the language, because that's a big problem for me speaking. Also, now I'm, even English that I know so well, I still stutter when I try to think about stuff. So it's a great difficulty. But I have met people, for example, when I was in Norway learning Norwegian, there was a guy, he was speaking not so great, but he was not afraid. He was just, going straight for the mark, not, and that's the right attitude, because you straighten the problems later. But, if you won't ever start like me, then
that's like me too. I'll know what I want to ask in my head, and I'll be stood in the queue repeating it to myself over and over and over. And I was like, you've got it. And then as soon as it comes out of my mouth, it just stutters and is so obviously not natural. I'm like, oh, okay, I just fucked that up. It's every time. All right, let's jump into the meat and the bones of the episode, I guess, which is myth. We're going to look at myth, but most with a main focus, on how we interpret it and how we look at these myths and kind of we can from them.
So my basic thesis is, I spent years collecting various interpretations of myths, like have some kind of overview of theory of myth. And I, went from the very beginning of the comparative religion, from the Mythology, where people were like interpreting mythology, like, okay, so this Baldur, he has described as very shiny person with very, white stuff. So he must be the representation of the sun, and his killing must be, evening or winter or something. And you have this nature mythological interpretation. So it's either the myths are representations of natural cycles, or or storms, or astral phenomena. And so that's one thing. Then there you have myths as representations of rituals, of basically, these were all references to some kind of ritual activity which is now lost, but we have the mythology that describe it. Or you have psychological explanation, what Freud and Jung came up with. So these are all some kind of psychic phenomena which are then projected into the outside world and described, personified, and stuff like that. Then you have various anthropologists who were able to find social structures in mythology, and social tensions represented in mythology. You have various historical interpretations, myths coming from. So, you have the whole enormous field of various interpretations. And when you look at who is coming with what interpretation, you can find that, the, anthropologist who is really fascinated with law procedures finds mythology can be explained via legal perspective. And somebody who is really fixed on libido and sexuality, of course, finds enormous amount of libido and sexuality as the core of myth. So my, let's say, after this review, what was for me this kind of point, some kind of fixed result is that mythology works like a mirror, but special kind of mirror, because all literature works to a certain extent like a mirror. We know that the author is dead. We just project ourselves into what we are reading. But mythology is a special kind of mirror because it, as it were, it has a shape, is a certain shape. It's framed with the notion of sacredness. It's something holy, or something, the highest truth, or something like that. And that means that it encodes really some kind of crucial stuff, and it's like multifaceted. So that's the trick. So it's a mirror for reflection of some kind of vital important stuff that we have. And what is interesting, that it doesn't mirror only, it's not relevant only for the cultures that produced it. Mythology is so popular, like the ancient mythology or mythology of indigenous nations is so popular for, Western people, because it's encoding not only stuff that's relevant for the local culture, but also fascinating for us. There is, of course, cultural element, like we have to read it in the perspective of the culture and have the cultural context, but there is something also human in it, like common for all humans. And that's I think what makes mythology special in a way, because if you look at various mythologies around the world, after some time, you can see that there are repeated motives, repeated structures, repeated some kind of major themes are there all around the world. So that's that's the first step in what mythology is and what's its meaning.
Okay, yeah. I think last time in the episode that I forgot to record, we started with like a basic what myth is, and kind of what would qualify between a myth and just like a normal story, I guess.
Yeah. So
is there a difference? Yeah, I'm trying to think. I guess for me, or maybe if I say my definition of a myth, you can tell me how close I am or far off. Because I would say a myth would be something that probably has some sort of either supernatural or an element where it's outside of what would be maybe humanly possible or exists in a different world. Maybe it would tend to be quite old, I guess. But again, that's maybe because all the myths we look at tend to be from bygone eras. So a myth would be something that was old. Yeah, again, like would probably like feature some sort of beasts or creatures that aren't maybe a mythological creature. It would be something that's not maybe in existence today. And I was trying to think whether I would class it with religion, but I don't think I would. I think I would say in my mind, it wouldn't necessarily be religious or wouldn't have to be religious. How am I doing? Am I anywhere near what a myth is?
I think you are covering one aspect of what from one avenue which is usually used for the definition of myth, and that's the content respect. So myths, usually prototypical myths have exactly what you mentioned. Very often they contain some kind of supernatural, special, miraculous stuff. But the problem is that some things like, I don't know, folk tales also contain miraculous creatures and magic and stuff like that. And so we have to use other means to, capture what myth is other than just content. Another thing is some myths do not look supernatural at first sight. So, for example, ancient Rome is a good example of this. There is this story of two brothers, Romulus and Remus. One kills the other while building the walls of Rome. It looks like history. It looks like something that could historically happen. You are just founding a new city, two brothers, normal. But if you look at other mythologies, you find everywhere two brothers at the beginning. I mean, like not 100%, but in many cultures, it is a mytheme. It's a mythical motive. Two brothers, Cain, Abel, Yama, Yami, etc. Even on Iceland, you have two brothers who, for the first colonists, who come, and it looks like history, but I suppose it's not. So otherwise, or history is magical and somehow generates two brothers where one dies and the other lives at the beginning of various cultures. So mythology sometimes looks like history, and we cannot then define it by just thinking when there are unicorns, it's mythology. So it has to be something else. It's a good indicator that there is some mythical stuff going on if you have supernatural elements, but it's not all there is. One thing which is just one other aspect you have to take into account is the position it has in culture. So if it is deemed sacred, then it's a good indicator that it's mythology. When it is just, old wives' tale, then it's folk tale, even if the content is at first sight indistinguishable from mythology. Yeah. So I call it the yeah.
No, I was going to say, well, so what would be the big difference between a myth and a folktale? Because again, I guess in my mind, I would probably put folktale as a subgenre of myth almost.
Yeah. The usual spectrum is like a myth, legend, folktale, or a fairy tale, or whatever. and then you have some kind of, let's say, history. And even legend is something else than myth, because myth, there is also the aspect that myth is usually, while legend takes place in the world more or less as we know it, myth takes place in this kind of strange time and place which you cannot really you cannot, you can't tell when and where did it happen with Balder, the murder. Was it Asgard? So it's somewhere else. But other myths, like when was it? I don't know. If you take some Greek myths, like this kind of, you start with the generations of the gods. It's sometime in the past, when Cronus and others, there was these progenies and they were killing each other and stuff. So this kind of illud tempus, the past time beyond the usual counting. But of course, it's so complicated. Some cultures are really historizing most of their myths. That's what the Romans did. They didn't have their own mythology. They took over the Greek mythology, and what was originally their mythology was turned into the earliest period of the history of Rome. So there we find the same material that we find in other Indo-European cultures, but this time it looks like history. In India, they had completely different approach to it. India tends to disregard history, so you don't find any proper time periods in India. Everything is generally around. Nobody was recording the stuff. Everybody was interested in eternal, glorious, monstrous happenings of myths. So there are these strong contrasts. For example, Jewish culture, Hebrews, they were very similar to Romans in the sense that most of mythology that we have looks like history. So I don't know, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, these characters are mythological characters, but they look like something that happened in history.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. What was the question?
I've got so many questions flying around my head that I'm trying to get them into some sort of order that I can think to ask. Because, the one that comes to mind straight away is, particularly in like a religious context, for me, I would say, because I'm not a particularly religious person, that say Jesus turning water to wine, or feeding, however, I can't remember the amount of people he fed with a fish. Like, to me, that would be classed as a myth. But to some, probably not all Christians, but surely probably some Christians, they would say, no, that is a historical fact. So where'd you get that kind of distinguish?
So this of course, I understand. I understand. So this is of course open to debate to a certain extent. If you look at how, the story, the legend about Buddha, there are so many things that happen there which are very similar to what we find in the New Testament in relation with the legend about Jesus. These are this is open to discussion. Of course, when there is this kind of let's say special birth, like God or somebody appears to the mother of the Savior. Then when the child is born, there are people coming, bringing gifts and prophesying stuff. We find this in both legends. Then when they are 12 years old, they are very clever in some school or something. The same in both legends. There are similar miracles happening, and I don't think, and we can debate, is it influence or is it some kind of pattern that tends to appear there? We find this in mythology actually very often. There are authors who just compared, 20, 30 heroic legends and myths, and found that, there are these kind of patterns. The hero is usually son of God, but from a common mother. Somebody wants to kill him when he's, young. So the baby has to be transferred somewhere, usually on water. Then, the hero returns back into the original country, then confronts somebody, wins a battle, kills a dragon or something, becomes a king. But then the look somehow turns away from him. He's cursed or has to run away, and then he dies, usually on the top of a hill under very special circumstances. His body is not found afterwards, blah, blah, blah. So there is this pattern, and the famous mythologist of the first half of the 20th century, Lord Raglan, who just collected these stories, he came up with these 21 features that these heroic myths have, and he gave a Raglan score to various heroes. So how high the score is, the highest score has Oedipus, who has all 21 features, and Jesus has like 17 or something, Siegfried and Gilgamesh and all these kind of heroes can be somehow put here or there in the pattern. And we can discuss how it comes. I myself think it's a combination of two things. One is really what works as a story, what affects us on some kind of cognitive level, when we are identifying ourselves with the hero, what works across generations, across cultures, tends to stabilize around this pattern. But also, most of these heroes are collected from this area, from India to Ireland, Iceland. So these cultures were in contact. So it's possible that some of the stories were from the same source.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this has really got me thinking now, which could be quite dangerous, I guess, because I think I've never really thought of it like this, but how you have Greek and, Greek, Roman, Nordic myths, you very clearly think of them as a myth. But then when I think of, say, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, like I don't automatically associate like myth to that. Like when I think about it, I would say like, it's myth, but you kind of don't have with them, maybe because they're still living religions, you kind of disassociate. And then when you just kind of put Jesus in this list of heroes, I was like, wait a minute, like Jesus is the same kind of thing as Sigurd, and like it felt very unusual even to me, and I'm not Christian. It felt kind of like an odd thing to do, and that kind of got me thinking that when you really strip back emotions and feelings from it, if you are atheist or agnostic and you don't believe in these religions, then they kind of are just myths. Yes.
And yes, exactly. And that's the trick, that it's like, the same problem as terrorists versus freedom fighters. So the same people, but you have two names for them if you are for them or against them. Okay, that's a common knowledge among the people who study mythology, that it is not a neutral term, because absolutely not. So only other peoples have mythology, not us. Okay, so of course, when we are Christians, we don't have mythology, they have mythology. So it's of course, Christianity has a core myth. The myth is somehow re-actualized at every mass, and so of course it's a religion like any other. So it has mythology and it has ritual. We have to be, in this sense, we have to be, not to give special treatment. If Australian Aborigines have myth and ritual, then it would be colonial to just exempt Christianity or Islam from this and think about them in other ways. So yeah.
Yeah, I love it when things make me just think of something that's kind of obvious and it's there, but I've just never really thought about it before, and I like it when that happens. So I guess that means if we're talking about interpretation of myth, I guess then would the peoples at the time recognize these as myths? So if it was the peoples, Scandinavians in the Viking Age, or Romans when in the Roman era, is that right?
Yeah.
Classical. Would they be classed as myth then, or would it just be? Does it kind of become myth once it's kind of collapsed and is not popular anymore? I guess maybe.
Good question. So the problem is that when today you say myths and facts about, I don't know what, getting exercise or something, or what food do you, myths and facts about food. Okay, so we use the word myth in everyday speech, and the newspapers and stuff, they use it in the sense of lies or incorrect information. And so if you ask ancient Roman or ancient or medieval pre-Christian inhabitants of Scandinavia, do you believe in lies? They will, of course, the term itself is manipulative, and it's useless and it's problematic. So we scholars have to always return ourselves to, by the word myth, we don't mean false information. We mean sacred stories. And everybody has sacred stories. I don't know, the American culture has the American dream. That's their core myth, and it's a myth. Okay, so every culture has sacred story in their center, or sacred stories. Some of them are better formulated and explicit, some of them are implicit, but they are sacred. If you live your life according to them, if somebody says something against them, you want to be bad and be if kind of so there are these strong images, strong values, and these are myths, and it doesn't mean that they are wrong or false or something. They are just sacred stories. So if we asked somebody from the, I don't know, antiquity, if they believed in their sacred stories, they would probably say, yeah, of course, sacred stories, fine. But we would have to then talk about what means to believe in something. Because again, Christianity did some changed the meaning of, created a new type of relationship to sacred stories. In the past, in the cultures other than, let's say, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, the relationship to sacred stories was not believing in them, was just telling them and just thinking they are important and just, they are connected to the gods we worship, so they are important. It's not belief in the sense of literal belief, whether, I don't know, Odin literally did this or that. It was like, this is a good, strong, powerful story. It makes sense. It's wonderful. Let's tell it. So the notion of belief is also somewhat different. It's a very complicated development of this notion. I think it's somehow connected also to legal stuff because it's based on, I don't know. So Christianity came up with credo, with the idea of you have this list of things that you have to say you believe in them, and that's somehow the belief, and that's very innovative. That's a new thing that the other cultures didn't have, this kind of relationship to their sacred stories.
Mm-hmm. So it's in a sense, I guess with like you say with Christianity, with probably the three main Abrahamic faiths, it's very, you have to pray maybe at certain times, or you have to almost like show your loyalty, I guess. It's, you have to either
I was maybe too harsh with the other two. I think for example, Judaism is quite, it's still orthopractic religion. So it's important, if you are part of the community, if you participate in the rituals, according to what kind of strand of Judaism. But if you do the stuff, then what exactly you believe is not that important. So many cultures are like that. It's important to participate. It's important to do the rituals, to be with the community, and to tell the stories. But the link, but do you really believe it? In what exact sense does this, work? This is not so important. And Judaism is, in a way, also like this kind of older tradition in this respect. But Christianity somehow born out of the Hebrew tradition, which really saw their mythology in history, and the Greek and Roman legal and philosophical tradition somehow combined into this concept where belief has to be this kind of, you have to profess some specific points where you literally believe in them and do not.
So kind of, if Christianity is very almost strict, and it's like this, these are the bullet points, you have to follow these, and you have to kind of live your life this way to then achieve heaven, I guess, is the idea, versus maybe the older religions, which would be kind of, these are a few little things that not necessarily you have to take, but these are kind of like things that are true, and you kind of have to do this ritual for this. But then the rest you can kind of make up yourself, and it's not really a question of 100%. Do you 100% believe in this? It's kind of these things we do, and you tick these boxes. So it's a little looser rather than that strict format of you have to do this, and this.
Yeah. So and you can see that the question, did the pre-Christian Scandinavians believe their myths, is problematic, because the word myth is problematic and the word belief is problematic.
Okay.
So that's why it's difficult to answer it with either yes or no.
No, it's fair enough. These things are rarely ever simple. So okay, so if we change direction, and instead of looking at like what the myth is, what people believed, and then just looked at how we kind of interpret from a modern perspective, maybe interpret myths looking back, because you mentioned earlier about how the the Romans took Greek mythology and almost embedded it into culture, and kind of, I guess, blurred the lines between what myth was and what reality was. Am I right in how I took that? Kind of, they made it as if it was real.
So I think that what Romans did were two things. First, they brought with them their own ancient stories, and these stories, they at some point, because they were very much political creatures, and they were very much concerned with history and practical matters, they just put this mythical material in the far past to the time when the Rome was founded. So what that material that in other cultures is in like told in the mythological way, in Rome it's told as their prehistory or ancient history of Rome. And at the same time, or as the Rome was growing, they were in contact with the Etruscans to the north, with the Greeks to the south. And from there, they, of course, because they were very receptive, they took over many, many mythological stories, and these were still in the mythological form. So for example, in the famous Metamorphoses, the book, the poem by Ovidius, there you find all the famous Greek myths. Romans knew them. They just knew them, and for them, they were, this kind of, I don't know, entertaining. Maybe for the learned people like Ovidius, they were more something like, they were taken symbolically mostly, or they were perceived as expressions of human passions. So Aphrodite was a representation of sexuality and love, and these were seen maybe a little bit more in this allegorical way, while the old traditions of the Romans themselves, which was also mythology, but was the story about Romulus and Remus and about the first tribes and their battles. This was also mythology, but it was presented as ancient history. And that's also what happened around Europe, with the first chronicles of various countries, even like including Czechia, from where I'm from. The earliest stories are mythology about women ruling and some, Amazons and stuff like that. Things that were, this kind of projection into the past of something that's actually mythological. So that's, yeah.
Does that make it more difficult in, I guess, in contemporary times to be able to differentiate what's a myth and what's not? If a culture has kind of presented it as their prehistory, does that make him, unless it has like a blaring dragon in there, I guess, does it make it more difficult to then kind of go, okay, well, that's a myth, that's not? Or is it pretty easy to spot what you're looking for, I guess?
Sometimes it's it's ongoing discussion. I am presenting my opinion. It's not necessarily the opinion of every myth researcher or historian. And I think that, and what's interesting is that, okay, so very far away in the past, you find these stories that are clearly unhistorical, but then as the narrative of Titus Livius' book or of the Czech chronicle I was alluding to, or of, Saxo Grammaticus, the historian of the Danes, it also starts with very legendary mythological material, but as it comes closer and closer to present time, it becomes more and more history. And at some point, it's just history. And there is no clear cut of It's less and less of a mixture of myth inside. So that's also tricky about it. So you can then argue, but we have this king. We have also attested in this source. So this king must be historical. But yeah, maybe the name is historical, but the story that you associate with him or is associated with him might be mythology. That's the case of King Arthur, for example. It's probable that there was some, I don't know, a Roman lieutenant or general or somebody, Artorius, and maybe he had some band of warriors from Scythia or somewhere. But all the stories about the magical sword, about Lady of the Lake, and all this kind of stuff, it suddenly grew out of this kind of original, maybe one interesting person. But if you strip, what sometimes I find problematic is people trying to find the real core of, for example, the myth of Arthur. And if they strip the story of all what is interesting about it, and you get only some boring Roman general or somebody who did nothing interesting other than maybe fought some battle somewhere, then you strip. So myth is something that's actually Mircea Eliade actually he refers to this interesting case when a folklorist, his colleague, was collecting stories in Romania, and at some point he find this legend about some kind of hero who was taken away by some I don't know, elves or something, and after some research, this folklorist finds out that the guy, the story is old, is just 10 years or 12 years old or something like that, and that the guy was just somebody who ran away from the military service, and so the story somehow grew around it, and this is how and the question is why, and why it grows in this way. My metaphor for this is that how you have the peril, mother of peril, this, how is it called, the clam that produces pearls.
Yeah, okay,
yeah. So that's culture, and a piece of sand or some just nonsensical piece of something falls into it, and it's the peril is growing around it, and the historical core of myth is this kind of piece of shit that's not interesting and important, and the culture produces wonderful story around it. There is no relation to or almost no relation to the original, but that's the interesting stuff. Why the legend of King Arthur took this specific form. Why do people need stories about magical swords and ladies from the lake and Holy Grail and stuff like that? That's the question. What in human psyche calls attracts these motives and combines it into something that is fascinating? That's the question that I always pose to myself, and I don't have an answer.
Yeah, I guess humans are complicated creatures. So do we get myths that, again, because like you said earlier, like myth in modern context does mean something that's not true. So I guess when I hear a myth, I automatically think that the story it's just not true. It's just a story. It's an entertaining story. But do we find them where they have like a good chunk of truth in them as well? So it could be quite factual, but also just has maybe like a little myth, little kind of creature or something that makes it a myth, but it's majority, the majority of it's true.
Yeah. We have these, but I can't give you examples from the ancient cultures because I can't. But I have you from current culture, and that's, for example, political myths or environmental myths. So both are based on facts or historical data or scientific data, but the story that is constructed from it is full of emotion, and it has the nature of myth, that it moves you, it calls you for it's just motivates you, gives you orientation in the world, stuff like that. I can give you one example from my home country, Czech Republic. We had this, every child learns at home in Czechia this kind of story, like there was in the past the glorious kingdom of Bohemia, where we had this king who built all the stuff, the castle and the bridge and all this kind of stuff, and the university. But then came the Dark Ages, when we were under the Austrians, and it was horrible. And we were, and then there was this revivification, and the light started again shining into and then we had the, finally Czechoslovakia, and then this kind of modern period when we can breathe again. So it's not a lie, but it is so infused with this kind of emotional, metaphors of light and darkness, that it is a myth. It's myth. It forms our everyday life. Every country has some kind of, narrative that's interpreting historical data in a very biased way, and it's so that's social myth, and it's an example of this. The similar case is the environmental mythology, which again, I not, take care. I'm not saying climate change is not real. I'm not saying, this is not real. Just that, when you look at the story that is behind most of the discussions we have, what kind of story do we have here? We have a story about original state of harmony. We people, used to be hunters-gatherers in harmony with nature. Always okay. But then the fall came. And then, we took the apple from the tree of knowledge, and we started building stuff. And we started, raping Mother Earth with our plows. And we started doing all the bad stuff. We fell from the original Eden, which was the hunter-gatherers. And as the ages progress, the sin and human filth is worse and worse. And now we are at the time of the utmost crisis, now or never. In just few years, if we don't mend our ways, the apocalypse is upon us. So that's a mythology. That's clear, pure myth, but also based on scientific data.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it feels like myths can be used to be quite manipulative. Then they can be used to invoke a reaction or an emotion. You can tell them in a certain way to kind of get your narrative across, to get the listeners to feel and think a certain way that you would want them to. And you think maybe that can be applied to ancient times as well, that these ancient myths would be used in a similar way to kind of whip up the crowd or the people you're telling them to then think how you want them to think or act a certain way to.
Yes. I think so completely. I mean, for example, the Greeks, there are many myths that were connected. For example, the whole project of the Trojan War. So all the Greeks made one giant fleet and this fleet went to Troy, and there they all fought against this eastern city. And so whenever you again again sing the Iliad, you again refer to this kind of Greek unity against the East. Of course, it's a nice story. There are a lot of war, a lot of battles, and it's fun. But also, you name all the ships with the names of their leaders and with the names associated with the cities from which they came whenever you sing the Iliad. So it's also a political statement of sorts of Greek unity. And so many myths have this kind of political dimensions. Not all, I mean, like if you look at the standard, at most of the Old Norse myth that we have, there is not much political message in it, other than that it somehow reaffirms functions like king. For example, the Riks Thula, the song of, or the song of Rígur tells the story of how the three social strata were created at the beginning by the god Heimdallr. So you have the slaves or the thralls, the carls, and the jarls, and this is a myth, but at the same time it has certain, let's say, political message there, like these social strata were created by God. You shouldn't just, it's nature. This is how it is. So yeah, but let's not reduce myths to this political side. This is important. Many cases it fulfills some kind of legitimation strategies, but myth is much more than that. It's also, I think that myths, I agree with the psychological interpretation that I think that because psychology was not there at the time, psychology was born at the end of 19th century or a little bit earlier maybe. So people were also thinking about how our inside works, but didn't have tools for it. So they think about the inner workings of human psyche via stories that look like interaction of various entities. So I think that what is so interesting about myth that it somehow is a fusion of these layers, and that's what's so powerful about it.
Wonderful. Okay, I know we have somewhat limited time today, so I do want to touch on conspiracy theories before we wrap up. We have to go there.
Yeah, of course.
So how can we put conspiracy theories with myth, or particularly modern conspiracy theories from myths?
Yeah. So if conspiracy theories are, we can divide them into various types based on how large scale is the conspiracy theory. So we have small scale conspiracy theories, like the problem around, the Kennedy, was he shot by the CIA or somebody else? Or that's a small scale. That's a event conspiracy theory.
That's a small one. I would say that's like one of the most popular conspiracy theories there is.
Yeah, of course. It's one of the most famous. It has a long tradition. There are conspiracy conferences about it, discussing it from all sides, and it's super productive. But and of course it can be some people think about it globally, so it's of course connected to everything else. But as a single moment, it's you can speculate about what really happened there and have various more or less let's say imaginative solutions for it. But then there are conspiracy theories which are larger, systemic, and the largest ones are super conspiracies. And these engulf, these encapsulate whole Earth and maybe even more. And these are proper mythology. There is, nothing, most of them look like they tell a story about. This time I would like refer to one of the most famous conspiracy theorist, David Icke. He has this theory. It's so complex, I probably will simplify it too much, but we don't have that much time to. He has lectures about it that take like 11 hours. Okay, so you have these like ancient race archons who are also reptilians, and these came very long time ago. They founded a lot of, all the religions refer to them, their visitations. It's a follow-up on Erich von Däniken and his theories about the, ancient aliens. And all this race can take on human form. They live amongst us and they rule the world. They feed on fear and hate, and therefore they make all the news because they are filled with hate and fear, and they just feed on it. And and then of course there are these secret cabals where they all meet, they rule the world. So how was it before this? Conspiracy theories are not the issue of last 20 years. They were born in this form, in more or less this form, sometime around the French Revolution. And during the 19th century, we had just the Illuminati and the Freemasons. And then it got more and more complicated. But
feels like there's loads of conspiracy theories now. They're really everywhere.
But what happened at that time, basically 19th century was phasing out of monarchies and phasing out of Christianity, phasing out of God. I think Nietzsche was quite explicit about it. He proclaimed very fittingly, the God is dead. And I mean, of course, in America, not yet, but in most of Europe, most people, the education in schools tells you a godless version of reality. And so we all share this. And so we lose. Until then, it was God has a plan. The whole thing is that, the world history is God's plan. But if you kill God, nobody has any plan. And then you also take away the kings. Until then, you had clear somebody who is responsible for what's happening. If the king doesn't work, then, let's replace him or something. But there was somebody like God, but small one, who rules the country, and it's a clearly responsible. When you start doing democracy and parliament and all this kind of stuff, it's so opaque. You don't see the mechanisms. It's so difficult. It's intransparent. So and you don't have any God ruling it. So these humans search for compensatory solution for this, so then naturally conspiracy theories appear because they give you a plan. Just the plan is not, God's plan, but a plan of some evil scheming politicians or worse. And so it's a very natural continuation of religion, of mythology, just in new form, in this kind of quasi-political, technocentric form. But it's just a new mythology. We have to read it in this way. We have to read it symbolically.
So what about flat Earth? Because that's one that fascinates me. Because we can pretty much, we can concretely prove the Earth isn't flat, but yet there is still a huge number of people that believe it is flat. Now that I feel like that feels different to what you just explained about how it's kind of.
Yeah, that's
the god's gone and the kings have gone. So you kind of have this like that. The flat Earth one almost feels rebellious in a way. The people like, I feel like even the people that believe it don't really believe it, but they're going to say they believe it because they want to just rebel against the norm. Like they know the Earth's not actually flat, but we just want to kind of be the edgelords of the world who kind of say.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you just said what I would say, that myth is not about, and that's true also about the conspiracy theories. Myth is not about this kind of, as we discussed, the belief. So you don't have to believe it. It just, if you know, we had actually, our students did research, interviews with people who believed in conspiracy theories. And what came out of these interviews, that absolutely minimum people really believe. They share conspiracy theories. They just, spread them because they hate the government and they want to just show them, the finger. And because they think there might be something. It feels like true. But if you ask them directly, like, do you think really reptilians? And say, no, I think, but those bloody reptilians. So it's much more about emotion, expression of emotion, expression of position, opposition to the mainstream or opposition to the establishment. And if the establishment controls the schools, the media, the blah, 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 all the institutions which spread the standard message, the standard knowledge, those who are frustrated with it have to turn to hyperbole or shouting. So they compensate for their lack of access to the means of power by just producing hyperbolic visions. And I think that's also the way how to treat the conspiracy theorists, not by derision, but by toning down what they are saying and actually asking, so what's behind this? You say, all these kind of George Soros and Bill Gates, they are sucking children's blood. Okay, nice. But, if you tone it down, it's actually a social critique. It's a critique of, imbalance of income. And it's not, it's not by accident that the richest people are usually those who suck the blood of little children. So it's a twisted social critique. And we should like translate the conspiracy theories into the language which is proper, which is some kind of pushback against this or that. And I think one of my favorite conspiracy theories is the chemtrails, which is not that popular now. I think it was like 10 years ago, very in vogue.
It was big, yeah. It was big for a while. I think the problem is then, though, that sometimes conspiracy theories turn out to be true, and you get the one that turns out to be real, then kind of feeds all the rest of them. Because you get somebody like Alex Jones, who's almost built a career on having one conspiracy theory be somewhat true. He had like the Bohemian Grove video that went popular, almost kind of made his career, this idea of people in hoods and the big owl that people was like sacrificing a fake body to, and it's a whole kind of very strange thing that he kind of filmed and uncovered, and this conspiracy theory that happened to be real. So then you kind of get that one thing that's real, then you can say 10 outlandish things and people go, oh, but if he was right about that, maybe he's right about all these other ones. And it feels like it almost feeds itself. You just kind of throw, there's, you know, the expression, you throw enough shit at the wall, eventually something will stick. It's kind of, it's almost like that. It's like you just throw all these things out there, and if one of them's right, then people kind of go, oh, well, if that one's right, maybe these ones are, and they get more and more outrageous as you go along.
Yeah, when I try, you know, because of course you're correct. There are conspiracy theories that really happened, like for example, or like dark, you know, this kind of secret projects like MK Ultra, which was this experimentation on humans with, you know, psychoactive torture and stuff like that. Really creepy stuff that really happened. So if you read stuff like that, of course, you have this kind of doubt in you, like, okay, if they were able to do this, then, you know, what else can be there? My hint that I use for my own sanity when I study this is this saying that I heard from somebody who said, you know, if you believe in conspiracy theories, you probably never tried to organize a school trip. So, you know, this kind of it's so difficult to keep. I mean, like, of course, secret services have their, you know, we all know, thanks to Edward Snowden, they are spying on us, stuff like that. But to, you know, to coordinate beyond certain dimension, to coordinate among many people, it becomes so difficult. Everything in the end, things spill out. So I am ready
but
to.
Edward Snowden is a perfect example of that. That eventually you get somebody who goes, "Oh no, this is kind of fucked." It's particularly, I think maybe it was much easier to keep it covered 500 years ago. But today, you know, everything's just digital. It's just you can take a photo of something and send it instantly, and it's there, it's out there. It's so much more difficult to keep these things hidden now. But maybe they have a way. Who knows? This is it. This is the. That's also the part of conspiracy theories are kind of exciting as well, aren't they? It's kind of like
that's
suck you in.
Fascinating, and that's the other side of the sacred. If it's not sacred in the sense of like you should not touch it, then it's fascinating. That's the case of the pop culture mythology. There are so many things like the film Matrix, for example, or you know, all this stuff around connected to the fantasy and science fiction community. There are people who are really taking seriously the Jedi stuff, and so it's clear that some of these visions are so powerful that you don't just watch it again and again, but also you somehow start believing it's more than that, and so that's a sign of there is a mythical dimension to it. Again, it's not I completely believe, it's not I completely disbelieve. It's somewhere in the middle, this kind of, wow, this is so powerful. There is something true in it. I don't know what exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the Matrix is a great one, because there are a lot of people who are like,
really?
we live in a simulation. But I think it's when they're believable enough, but the ordinary person can't disprove it. So things I think, like especially with the flat Earth, it makes complete sense, but you have to believe that, like the NASA photos or like the photography, you have to believe that they're real. And most people go, okay, yeah, it makes complete sense, and you can see the curvature of the Earth. But if you believe in the flat Earth, it's easy enough for them to say to somebody like me, go, okay, well, prove it. And then you kind of go, oh, fuck, but I can't prove it without sending you either like a NASA photo or whatever, like global space system, like their photo, or been like, oh yeah, we'll go and look at the curvature of the Earth, and they're like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, but you prove it, and it's kind of like, oh, but I can't. I have to, and then so then they're then able to go, oh yeah, but that could be faked. So it's that kind of where it's believable enough, but also you can't. An ordinary person can't disprove it. They have to rely, and I think that's where you get this kind of like Goldilocks zone for things like all the simulation. It's like, well, could be real. Like, prove it's not real. It's almost, and it kind of goes back to almost like the God situation. It's kind of like, well, prove God's not real. And I think, well, I can't prove it's not. You kind of just have to look at all the things we have and assume, and you get in that kind of position where unless you can prove, you kind of, you get these things that kind of breed.
Yeah. I think that also if you start, the problem is our image of the world is based on trust. I trust the encyclopedias. I trust, the textbooks. I trust that, some scientist did some kind of experiment. Somebody else, checked whether it's true, checked the data, checked the numbers. It all works out somehow. And I believe all this enormous structure. But if you stop believing in this, then you question everything. So somebody hands you over a photo of from the International Space Station. You say, okay, how do I know this is not some kind of AI painting or whatever?
As technology advances as well, these things, it's insane because with especially with AI and particularly like voice, they have like the whole voice manipulation where they can make people say there is hundreds of hours of me saying all sorts of things. I'm sure if somebody wanted to, they could take the snippets of my voice and manipulate into saying anything. And we're kind of in that age where somebody could make it where it's something I actually didn't say, but it's created to be that way. So we're in this time where there is all this doubt and things can be faked. You kind of have to question everything almost.
Yeah. So, but most of us don't do it and just rely on the establishment or mainstream structures, and we are more or less okay. But but if you don't feel fine either for, I don't know, maybe you didn't, maybe there's always, also there is in every healthy society, there is always people who have some problem with it, even if the society works fine, and our societies have many problems. So, we that's another thing I always want to add when we talk about conspiracy theories or things like flat Earth. I think that even if sometimes we just can't believe our eyes or ears when we hear it, in the end, it's a sign that we have at least some kind of freedom of thought, and it's So
and I think something to end on is that I think most people listen to this will believe in a conspiracy. They will probably say they're not conspiracy theorists, but they will believe in one conspiracy theory. But to them, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's just true, and that kind of links us back to myth in general. That like a lot of people there are myths, but not the one that they believe in. The one that they believe in. No, and again, back to religion. It's this one's real because I believe in it, and I think that this one's real. But all the other ones are conspiracy theory. And like a lot of people, I think the JFK one is probably the one that kind of cements it for most people. It's like, oh yeah, there's all these conspiracy theories, but JFK, he was probably shot by the government. So I'm not a conspiracy theorist because this one's so obvious that's probably what that's what happened. So I don't believe in conspiracy theories, but this one is true.
Yes.
So they wouldn't class themselves, and I think that's a kind of fascinating way to wrap this whole episode up and put it all together.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, there we go. Let's jump over and do a quick Q&A with. Have you got enough time? Maybe 10 minutes?
Yeah, 10 minutes are okay. Is okay.
Yeah, we'll just do a quick Q&A. So again, if anybody listening to this, thank you for obviously listening to the show. If you do enjoy, please leave as a 5-star rating, a positive review. And like I said, as I said at the start of the show, you can check out Patreon. It's just Patreon.com/Nordic Mythology podcast. It's £3 a month. You get a bonus episode every week. Sometimes they're 10, 15 minutes. Sometimes they're half an hour, 45 minutes. But you get that extra episode where you can ask your questions to the guests, or you can submit your questions ahead of time. And even if you don't get the chance to ask your own question, there's a lot of good conversations that happen after, because people sometimes are asking questions that I've missed. There's a lot of things that I miss and people pick up on. So they are worth listening to, and you get the whole back catalog on there as well. So yeah, if you can, like I say, it helps us keep the show going, and we very much appreciate it. Jan, is there anywhere you want people to follow you? Check your. I found with most scholars, they're like, you know what? I don't have like a public persona.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I have like my personal webpage where you can find info about me and things that I'm connected to. So my teaching is there. My I also work as a psychotherapist. So stuff like that. And then I also, from very early, I developed my own fantasy world, which is called Siranie, and there is a link to this with interactive maps and stuff like that. I have friends I develop it with, and it's actually one of the background reason why I studied all the old languages and religions, because I really want a good research for the creation of our fantasy world. So
wow.
So
where can people find that?
It's siranie.net, and I can send you the link if you yeah,
absolutely. We'll put it in the show notes again for people that don't know what show notes are. It's just a little bit of text.
It's just creativity. It has no purpose other than describing lands that are beyond our world. So
it's a lot of fun, and I imagine a lot of people that listen to this will enjoy that. Okay, thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun. I feel like we could have spoken for a lot longer, and hopefully you can come back in the future when we have a little more time and we can explore even further.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for having me here, and thank you all for listening.
The second time. Perfect. Thank you.